If we could start to gather, just gently come to your chair. Before we begin, has anyone lost a glass? Okay, it's right up. I'll put it right here for you. And Wiltrude, it's fine. Bringing contemplatives to quiet. My name is Mary, and we welcome you to this 40th gathering of 40 years of contemplative outreach. I always believe that everyone is here because you were meant to be here, Hurricane Helen or not. And before we get into our evening program, just a moment to thank Jenny Adamson and her faithful conference team you'll hear more about, and Joanna Brunson and the Atlanta team that has welcomed us here. So we're going to begin with some beautiful chant that Kathleen Gilgannon will lead us in. And I would ask you to remember all those who are not here, either by travel delays, by death, by whatever circumstance, if we open our hearts and bring them in, knowing that we are always connected.
Thank you, Mary. It's actually not I who will lead the chant, but our dear brother Chuck from St. Benedict's Monastery. He was kind enough to make a recording for us. So we'll hear that in a minute. And it's a Taizé chant, Ubi Caritas, et amor, ubi caritas Deus ibi est. And which many of you will know the chant from Taizé. It's, sorry? No, it's not, the chant is not in there. And the reason the words are not in there is because we talk about embodying the prayer once, we talk about embodying the prayer. And when I was a child, I remember always hearing, when we sing, we pray twice. So the words are purposely not in there so that you absorb them, start to sing them when you're ready to. And as we do this, to once again, as Mary suggested, hold in our hearts all of those who are not here with us tonight and this weekend. The piece with Brother Chuck goes for a certain amount of time, and then we'll continue on once his recording is over, just for a little while longer until we get fully in the spirit of the weekend. Matt, are you there?
Deus civil, Deo se ve. Deo se ve.
40 years. We are pleased to share with you Wendy Marie, the coordinator of Pretoria Centering Prayer Contemplative Outreach in South Africa, shared with us her thoughts on 40 and the significance both in scripture and in life. Looking around the room, I think most of us have hit 40, maybe a few times. And I was deeply touched having the privilege of being with Wendy and the South Africans in April for their annual conference at the depth of wisdom and how it opened me to the significance at a level that I hadn't captured before. So without further ado, we will be sharing with you Wendy.
Hello, everybody, and a warm greeting from everybody here at Contemplative Outreach in South Africa. It's a real joy for me to be a part of this celebrating the 40th anniversary of Contemplative Outreach. When we think of the number 40, we know in the Bible, I think it says it is about 157 references to the number 40, whether it be 40 days and 40 days and nights, 40 years. The number is very significant, and it's actually a sacred number. So this idea of celebrating 40 is actually wonderful. And it's a way for us to acknowledge what has gone before us and to take responsibility actually for what lies ahead of us in the next 40, or closer still the next 10, because 50 years is also significant, because then it's the year of Jubilee and it has its own spiritual significance around the number 50. So when we look at the number 40, what it means, it denotes always a change. So it would be interesting in whatever you are reading in the scriptures around that number 40 to look out for what is the change that happens after either the 40 days, the 40 years. What was the change that happened? It's about renewal. It's about transition. It's about ending one great task and starting another great task. And right throughout it, wherever there's 40, there's also testing, trials, suffering, but always with a change at the end. Old ideas are set aside, and new inspiration and understanding is set forth in these 40 days, 40 nights. I think for us, sometimes it can even be 40 seconds, 40 minutes, 40 hours. It's not the length of time. It's that 40 denotes a change. And I know in my own life, I think I've needed many 40 days.
It is still broadcasting down here, Matt, on these screens. Well, there's always turmoil, there's always change, and there's always something before.
Need 40 days more than once. Moses needed to go up that mountain more than once to come down with the tabernacle, which took the 10 commandments with law to the picture of grace that was set out in the tabernacle, that was set out to show how did God actually want them to relate to him. Not just don't do this, don't do that, thou shalt not, thou shalt not, thou shalt not. But there came a way of relating. There was the outer course, the sacrificial system. There was the inner court, the incense, the worship. There was a way set out of relating to God that was better than sacrifice. And there was grace, that certainty always of forgiveness when we fail. I think for me, I love the story of Elijah, where there was a man that went in a couple of hours, I think, from hero to zero. So there we have Elijah, this mighty prophet of God, working this extraordinary miracle of calling down rain where there had been drought. And bearing in mind, all he saw was a wisp of a cloud in the sky. And on that, he based his faith and certainty that when he asked God for rain, rain would come, and indeed it did. And of course, he then goes on after that to slay all the Baal prophets, which didn't go down very well with old Jezebel. And there's old Jezebel coming after Elijah and saying, I'm going to kill you. Now, here's this mighty man of God, having experienced what it's like to be an instrument in the hands of God. Everybody's saying, oh, Elijah, what a prophet. And here comes Jezebel, I'm going to kill you. And this hero turns into a wimp, deflates immediately and runs away in great fear for his life. And there starts his 40-day journey. From that point, journeying towards Mount Sinai, Mount Horeb, to encounter God. And we know that story, how it ends with him being in the cave. And then God calls him and he stands out in the doorway in the mouth of the cave. And he doesn't come in the voice of the earthquake or the mighty wind, but we find God speaking to him in the still small voice. And I love this because I don't know about you, I've had those moments in my life where faith seems to be so strong and you seem to think nothing will get you. And in another moment, something completely shatters you. And you start that same journey toward God with so many questions, like Elijah did. Woe is me. I'm the only one left. Where's everybody? I've got nobody to support me. I might as well die. And so this great hero becomes full of self-pity and desperate. But what I love is he journeyed toward God, toward meeting with God. Took him 40 days to do that. And after 40 days, and hearing God's still small voice, he's turned around and God sends him right back from the way he came. But this time knew he was not alone. He knew that God was providing him with Elisha, that he's never doing that journey. Whatever God asks him to do, he's not alone. And the rest of his life is spent walking with Elisha, training him, walking. Even when he leaves the earth in that chariot, it's Elisha who's his companion. He had to learn that he's never alone. And so for us, we do those journeys. We learn from these stories. It took 40 days, 40 nights for Elijah to actually realize that he's never alone and he's not the only one, and that God is there for him, even when your life looks like God is nowhere and he can't be found. 40 is really very significant. As I say, it's not always about days or hours or months or years. It's about a season that God seems to have set in his own will and plan to be able to change us, to transform us, to move us from the false self into more moments living out of the true self. We need that change. Sometimes it's wonderful moments that change us, but a lot of the time it's pain, it's suffering, it's trials. These are the things, unfortunately, that help us face, like Elijah had to face, the fears within him. We sometimes have to face, or often face, the fears within ourselves. But the point is, can we keep journeying towards God while, even all the way of we moaning, even all the way that we crying out to God and saying, oh, I'm all alone, I can't do this. Whatever it is in that moment is your moment of self-pity and how you're seeing yourself. But keep moving, keep moving, keep moving. And I think every time we sit in our centering, it's like we're doing that movement toward God, toward the still small voice that will change how we think, how we see, how we respond. So every sit is like a moment of 40 that goes towards bringing about a transition within ourselves, a transformation within ourselves, that brings about a change, that opens a new door within ourselves to the greatness of God within us. And so I think as we look at that, there's many stories, especially in the Old Testament, of David and Goliath. I mean, Goliath taunted them for 40 days before David comes along and does the seemingly impossible. A little youth slaying a giant. But that's what our spiritual journey is all about, isn't it? Us as the little youth, in our experience of knowing God through our centering prayer and our Lectio Divina, slaying the many giants that are along our journeys. And there are many. And sometimes it takes us longer than 40 days to slay them, and then we do another season of 40. But the victory is there. So what can these stories really tell us? I think for me, I love the idea that God has a definite plan or time frame in mind. It's not a nilly-willy thing of, okay, I'll leave them for a while and go on a vacation and wait and see how long it's going to take them. God has a set time in his plan for you and for me to bring about the change that is needed. There's hope in that. I find hope in that. It's not a season that has no ending to it. I'm sure if somebody had to sit down and record the last 40 years of contemplative outreach, its history, they'll be able to show how it changed from the beginning to what it is now. How there's been, through testing and trial, it didn't come without sacrifice. I read a bit on Mary Mazowski on her audacity to be divine. It cost to set up this community. It cost her. I'm sure it cost Father Thomas and many others. They had to give up so much of their own life to pursue this journey, but they kept going towards God. And so today, we have a community that's been gifted to us, a supportive community. We have a way of life to live into because they kept moving toward God. They took their 40 years and they've turned it into something so remarkable. And so I just want to end with, what about the next 40 years? Some of us might be here or we might not be here. Some that are sitting there today where you are sitting will be, some won't be. But when the next generation looks back at the 40 years that's to come from now on, what will they see? What will have changed? We've inherited by others, and not only the last 40 years, going back centuries, others' commitment to the contemplative life. We've inherited a fruitful vineyard, a fruitful land that we step into. But we have to ensure that there's a fruitful land for those in the next generation that can partake, because we have sown a crop that is really for them to eat from, as we are eating from the crop that others have set for us. So how do we go forward? How do we enter into the promised land? How do we live the contemplative life? We have our centering, we have our Lectio Divina, and all the wonderful prayer practices. And if you notice, they're all around 40 days. So when they set that up, they understood the principle of 40. It's to bring a change. So when we're doing like the prayer of forgiveness, it is to change the unforgiveness and to allow the forgiveness to enter in. It's a new beginning, a new life that forms within us when we put that praxis into practice. So I don't know what is, and I'm hoping that as we journey forward together as a community, an international community, isn't that wonderful, from all over the world, we would be able to encourage each other about living the contemplative life. And in living it, to stay faithful to God. And not like the Israelites did, kept going into rebellion, kept going into idolatry. That we would know how to sustain the communities that we're in, to be faithful, to help them grow, to help them blossom in this land, and to help them sow seeds for others to partake of in the generations to come. And so I'll leave that with you there, and maybe in time we can, well, we always look to contemplative outreach to guide us, that in the leadership that there is now, post Thomas Keating's death, to go forward as he would have wanted us to do. Thomas was always moving forward, never stagnating, forward. The more of God that needed to be discovered, the more of me in God that needed to be discovered. What God can do through me needs to be discovered. Always. We never reach an end point, an arrival point. Where will we go? How will we do it? I think those are the challenges that lie ahead of us. But we do it together because we're a body and we're a community of like-minded, contemplative, living people. So bless you all. Goodbye.
So you can see what a joyful presence Wendy is, as is most of the South African community. So we have the gift of Father Carl Rico, who many of you know just turned 90. So let's see what Father
Congratulations on our 40th anniversary of contemplative outreach. I wish I could be there, but I'm 90 years old. And on that weekend that you're having your meeting, they're celebrating my 90th birthday in this parish that I've ministered to for 37 years. And I wasn't going to miss it for all the tea in China, because really it has all to do with relationships day in and day out. And as I'm congratulating you on this, numbers come into my mind. 50 years ago, I sat at the feet of Father Menninger and learned centering prayer. 40 years ago, I sat at the feet of Father Thomas at the retreat in Lama that developed the organization. And as I look at it, I see it as 2 centuries, the past century and the new century, constantly growing. Many wonderful people were called forth by the grace of God. My good friend, Gail Fitzpatrick Hopler, was a teacher, was being taught by an Eastern master who said, find a Christian leader, a master. And she found Father Thomas. And Father Thomas found her. An intimate relationship built not only in friendship and spirituality, but in administration in order to lay the foundation for the organization. Before the last century, lo and behold, there was Mary Mrzowski in the New York area, desiring community and saying we need practices. And her practices today are so vital, coming out of her experience of being a divorced and separated Catholic. Lo and behold, Pat Johnson, who was on the Lama retreat with us as a server, not as a participant, her heart for ministry, her heart for retreat, her heart to walk the path with you was planted in the retreats coming out of Snowmass. And lo and behold, Sister Bernadette Teasdale in the Archdiocese of Denver, when the bishop said, please establish these as local parishes And I went around with her for 2 years with our dog and pony show, presenting it. But she, at the end of it, said, yes, we need a center. We need a center. And before the last century, a wonderful lady I worked with in marriage and family and still am friendly with, Marie Howard. Marriage and family, relationships, grassroots, so important to nourish everything on a local level. I want to highlight those folks. And during that time, wonderful, wonderful experiences that took place with ECI. Isabel Castellano, her genuine wisdom and strength and the beauty that was brought to us of the importance of relationship and, in a certain sense, getting things done with fun and harmony and joyfulness. And then Tom Skinner, the 11-step program, insisting that we see that there is a place for centering prayer on that 11th step. And the gifts that came out of the Church of Conscious Harmony with Marianne Best and Pamela Begeman and the ministers there that added another dimension in the new century for us. I mean, this is so beautiful to see this experience in many ways, how this has continued to grow. And we're still growing, still moving, and still in a certain sense trying to grasp the understanding what it means to really minister to God and consent to God's presence in our lives over and over again. And the one thing I remember in closing was Father Basil Pennington said so beautifully, keep it simple, saints. Keep it simple, saints. And his words were, practice, practice, practice. Practice, we grow. No practice, we have a study club. God bless you all. Have a wonderful time. I wish I were there. No, I don't. I like where I am right now, but I'm happy for you. God bless you.
You can feel Carl's energy, can't you? And now our final video presentation will be Gail Fitzpatrick Hopler for tonight.
I'd like to give my well wishes to all the people gathered at the conference. Very excited for them. And I never dreamed in my dream or my experience of contemplative outreach that it would last this long, honestly. But I'm delighted that it has. And I hope that it continues to go for many years, because I feel as though it's something that is missing. It's missing. And the busier our culture and our society gets, the more I'm convinced it's missing. So to be able to offer people the practice of centering prayer in the Christian tradition is a real blessing. It's a blessing for the world. So I hope it goes on, and I hope that people will continue the practice and support all of what's going on to offer it to other people. Because it's a person-to-person type of prayer. It seems to me that anytime in my experience over the years, anytime anyone would talk about centering prayer, or they would want to bring it somewhere or take it somewhere or do something with it, it was always at the initiative of one person. They would go on a retreat, or they would go to a prayer group, and then they would want to bring it to their friends. They would want other people to learn about it. And then they would be interested in figuring out, or how can we get this in our parish? How can we get this in our group? How can we move it? How can we take it? What can we do with it? So it's fascinating. So I've always thought of it as rather than a whole quote unquote organization of people trying to interest others in a contemplative practice, it was really when my heart is open and my desire for God is deepened, then I want to share it with other people. And so I'm interested in finding someone who can teach this practice to them. And that seems to be the way it was handed on, or at least in my experience. Now, I've been retired, I think it's about 8 years now, and I haven't really kept up with what's going on in contemplative outreach other than, newsletters and things like that. But I would imagine it's still in that organic kind of mode, And so after that Lama retreat, that first experience where we came together in New Mexico at the Lama Foundation, the seeds, I believe, of contemplative outreach were sown there, but we didn't know it. They were sown in silence, and we all were willing to continue the practice. We committed to doing that and just wait and see what happened. Like, what does God have in store for us? So every time Father Thomas would come to the East Coast, he would get in touch with those people who had been on the retreat, Father Carl, Mary Mrzowski, myself, Gus Reininger. And he had a friend, Ed Bednar, that he had known from Spencer when he was up in Spencer. And he was living in New York at the time. So he would invite him to be part of, this sort of brainstorming group. And so one time Gus hosted a meeting at his house and brought all these people together. And they were trying to figure out how to offer centering prayer workshops from parish to parish in New York City. And then which they felt would at that particular time would spawn prayer groups. And then those prayer groups would have a little group of people who were practicing centering prayer, and they were interested in supporting one another. And Ed had a particular interest in that because he had discussed it with Father Thomas. And in fact, he had written a proposal, a grant proposal to get some money to do such a thing. And his vision was, with Thomas, they discussed, which none of us were part of, this was in the 70s, I think, the end of the 70s and the beginning of the 80s, when Ed and Thomas were to have these conversations, because I believe Ed was living up near Spencer at the time. And so they had this idea, maybe we can get some money from some grantor to let us do these workshops in the different parishes in New York. So that's what he did. He wrote the grant. And by the way, he named the grant Contemplative Outreach, which was pretty interesting, isn't it? And so that name didn't just come out of nowhere. It was Ed Bednar who named it. It was he called. And to work that hand in glove with Thomas Keating was a great privilege of my life. Now, it wasn't like he wasn't easy to work for. I mean, he had his little, he was an abbot after all. So, but he was a wonderful, he had a wonderful spirit and heart, and he always listened to the Spirit. And he would always say, he would call me with something that was happening, and he would say, I would like to invite you to sit with me more frequently in prayer until we come up with some ideas of what we should do or how we should go. So we didn't ever do it without what we felt was a discernment of the Spirit to move in a direction. Move in whatever direction. And certainly, everybody had an idea. Everyone had an idea. But Thomas had a way of just waiting it out. And he would say, no matter what people would say to him, he would say, oh, yes, that sounds good. And then he would just wait. He wasn't like rushing out the door to do it, you know. After, it took a long time to sort of get that, you know. He was always grateful, always grateful for people's ideas, for people's generosity, for the people who appeared and wanted to help and wanted to serve. He was always very, very grateful for all that. But he didn't always act on everything that everyone offered right away. I remember my friend, Sister Mary Margaret Fung. She's a Benedictine nun. She was on our board for, I think, 6 or 8 years. And she would talk about the rule of St. Benedict. And she gave me a book one time. She said, I think you would learn a lot of it. Why don't you read this? Okay. Thomas Keating was jumping off every page, you know? So I said, oh, this is where he left. But it was really wonderful to connect that up, you know. He did it spontaneously. He did it because he lived it, and he didn't spout it. He lived it. And it just came from him. It was where the answer was, where it was for him. So great lessons, great lessons. So like I said, it was quite a privilege to work with him. So I worked for Contemplative Outreach for about 32 years, counting my volunteer time. And I served I saved in just about every capacity, from, you know, setting up chairs and selling books and facilitating and coordinating. And so, you know, doing just about all the jobs that everybody probably still does. I'm not too sure. And so I know what it takes, and what a great gift it was for so many people to step forward and be willing to give their time and themselves and because of their practice. And they too were feeling called to help, to serve, they wanted other people to have what they had, to receive what they had received, because it was such a great gift. And so I think many people were blessed by that whole experience because of that, always out of the sincere desire to serve others. And so I hope it continues that way. I hope it always is a group of people serving from their heart to others. And I think if it continues that way, it'll continue. But I will never, in my mind, I'll never replicate another relationship like I had with Thomas. It was unique and special, and we shared a lot, you know, and it was very good. And he had, you know, there were a number of people that he had wonderful relationships with, and they've all benefited by it, I'm sure. I'm sure of it. So, and I know he did too. You know, I know he did too. So that's really a nice exchange, you know. It was good. So I don't know what more I can wish for Contemplative Outreach, other than that they stay true to the vision and deliver the silence, and offer from their heart what God has given them, because it's rare. It's rare. It's a gift, and contemplation has always been seen as a gift, and it really is a gift. And to be able to share that with others, I think, is a really unique gift. So that's the task, and but you don't want to get in the way of it. Just let it flow and let it grow and let it be blessed.
So through these days, you will have some other postcards from folks who will share their wisdom, because we truly do stand on the shoulders of giants. Now, if you look in your packets, you have what Gail referenced, which is that vision statement and the principles. So as we go through this time, may we embody that the reason for this group being is that we embrace the process of transformation in Christ, both in ourselves and in others, through the practice of centering prayer. So you will see on your schedule that we have centering prayer tomorrow morning. Not in this room. I just want to point out, directionally challenged right this moment. There are 2 rooms next to each other that are filled with chairs because we don't have one room that's big enough for all of us. But for all of the sits, tomorrow morning at 7:15, either in Basswood or Dogwood, and they are marked, we will have centering prayer. And then we will gather back here for Pamela's presentation after breakfast. So this is for the large groups. The prayer rooms will be throughout the time, and we will embrace each other through our own and each other's transformation. So if your luggage doesn't arrive, I thought it was pretty funny that when Wendy was referencing Elijah, that we have a hurricane out there, but I don't know, our 40. So as we look at this with many travelers who've come a long way, we wish you a peaceful slumber. May it be comfortable. And anything that's needed, please, there are many of us around, and I would just ask any of the volunteers to just raise your hand. So if you just look around, if you have questions as you go around, grab anybody, but we're here to serve. Remember Thomas's dear line, it's really the God in us serving the God in others. So sweet dreams, my friends, and we look forward to sharing these days with you. Oh, we have one more thing. I am sorry. Thank you. Oh.
So we have one more Brother Chuck recording here that we're all there, and it's in your folder. It's a little bit of a sing-along here. Come on down, Neve. And a little piece of business before we do this song is that if you have a car and you're staying at the hotel, your room key will get you in and out of the garage for parking. If you're leaving the hotel every night, we have parking passes for you that are out in the hall for each day. So someone will be out there to help you with that. This is our friend Neve. Oh, that's weird. Don't look. We're ready, Matt.
Be still my be still my that I to shake waters roll The valleys tremble with fear, and yet our strength, our refuge, whispers in our ear. Be still, my still, my nations fight. O kingdoms fall, those spiteful hearts will harm. Your mercy holds us. We hear you call. We linger in your resting arms. You say, be still, my still, my hold our Lord has done to change our hearts of stone. God breaks our arrows, God breaks our bows. God calls us chosen, calls us God's own. Still my heart, still my heart, still my
I'd like to give my well wishes to all the people gathered at the conference. Very excited for them. And I never dreamed in my dream or my experience of contemplative outreach that it would last this long.